Lewis Strauss thinks he has the perfect answer to the Navy's problem. A bomb test to prove Navy ships can survive atomic weapons. Operation Crossroads.
Sort of a contest between the Navy and the Air Force, in which Air Force bombers will try and sink Navy ships.
The first casualty in the contest is Leslie Groves. The Navy, not Groves, will be in charge of Crossroads. They'll do the test in the middle of the Pacific Ocean at the tiny island of Bikini. The Navy evicts the residents and assembles a target fleet. Over 90 captured German, Japanese, and surplus U.S. warships will be bombed. There'll be 3 explosions: Able, Baker, and Charlie. 1 in the air, 2 underwater. Crossroads is a huge operation. $100 million, 42,000 men, 240 ships, not counting the targets, instruments, cameras, and more cameras, film, miles and miles of it, animals, so doctors can study what the bomb does to living creatures, and reporters from all over the world.
It was a show. It was a spectacle.
At last, all was ready for Able Day, tentatively set
July 1st, 1946, the show begins.
Dave's dream is roaring down the runway, engines singing.
For the first test, Able, they'll drop the bomb from a plane.
Bomb bay doors are open.
The plane approaches. The bomb is dropped.
Unfolded are a myriad of majestic, startling, and awesome effects, a panoply that only the cameras can record in faithful detail.
The bomb, the same Fat Man model dropped on Nagasaki, has a force of 20,000 tons of TNT. B-17 drones flown by remote control are sent into the mushroom cloud to take measurements. It's the first nuclear explosion to be witnessed by the public. But the public is 18 miles away, and after all the buildup,
I'm a bit disappointed as to the size of the flash.
You didn't see ships flying through the air, and the first reaction was, the atomic bomb, not such a big deal.
3 weeks later, a second test, Baker. This time, the bomb will be underwater. The scientists think it's a terrible idea. They warn that exploding an atomic bomb underwater will create a witch's brew of radioactivity, releasing enough plutonium to poison the entire armed forces of the U.S.
They knew what was going to happen when you set off an underwater explosion. It was going to make a lot of contamination. But I guess they lost out to Admiral Blandy.
Navy Admiral William Blandy is the man in charge of Crossroads. And from the start, he's got a PR problem.
I am not an atomic playboy, as one of my critics labeled me, exploding these bombs to satisfy my personal whim.
Many considered it a boondoggle.
The bomb will not start a chain reaction in the water, converting it all to gas and letting all the ships on all the oceans drop down to the bottom.
There was a tremendous amount of pressure, I think, on the Navy to try and convince the public that this was worthwhile.
Bikini Atoll and Baker Day, the underwater explosion of the 5th atomic bomb. The bomb and instruments are set into action. Aboard the Los Alamos firing ship, nerves are stretched to the breaking point. 5 radio control circuits will set off the blast in this prelude to push-button warfare. 3, 2, 1, fire.
An underwater shock wave is clearly visible. In the first 1 second, 2 million tons of seawater are lifted into the air. As the water rises, it creates a column nearly a half-mile wide. Now it starts to fall back. The water falling out of the sky creates a base surge, like the mist at the bottom of a waterfall. The surge, nearly 1,000 feet tall, completely envelops the target ships. No one has ever seen anything like it. The sheer power and magnitude of the atomic bomb. But so far, despite 2 of these bombs, the results look pretty good for the Navy. 75 ships survived, less than 20 sunk.
The Navy felt that they came out of it with flying colors, and Blandy said, yes, the Navy can withstand the atomic bomb.
The Navy plans to put sailors on these ships and sail them triumphantly back to the U.S. But there's a problem.
At first, there seemed to be little damage, but succeeding days told a different story.
The 1,000-foot-high wave of water that drenched the ships was highly radioactive. The ships are now contaminated.
Geiger counters rattle wildly. The area is loaded with death-dealing gamma, neutron, and other lethal rays. And there is no complete protection against this terrifying invisible killer.
At first, the Navy simply doesn't believe it.
You can't smell radiation, you can't feel it, and these Navy guys were just going to get back on their ships and survive the bomb.
Now they have no idea what to do.
The ignorance was rampant. There was no real plan for decontamination.
They try hosing down the ships with seawater. Trouble is, the seawater itself is now highly radioactive. And when the sailors go back to their own ships to change clothes, they contaminate those ships too. The man in charge of radiation safety, Army Dr. Stafford Warren, tries to cancel the operation.
Stafford Warren doesn't want the sailors back on the ships, but it's pretty hard to go up against the entire U.S. Navy.
In desperation, Stafford Warren gets a fish from the lagoon and places it against a piece of film. The fish is so radioactive, it exposes the film all by itself.
The glow was produced by the exposure of the film to radiation.
Finally, Admiral Blandy and the Navy are convinced. Crossroads is halted. It's been called the world's first nuclear disaster. Only 9 ships are ever successfully decontaminated. Most of the rest are towed away and deliberately sunk. The Air Force will remain the primary keeper of the bomb for now. But Crossroads turns out to be a good thing for Los Alamos.
I don't think the laboratory would have stayed in business very long had we not had a customer. But the Navy came in and gave us a job. It gave us some work to do and kept the laboratory going through some very uncertain times.
After July 1946, Los Alamos Lab will grow, building and testing more and more bombs over the coming decades. Crossroads also becomes part of popular culture. Even today, the Baker shot remains the most enduring single image of the power of the bomb. Just a few weeks after the second Crossroads shot, an unexpected event will give Americans another, much darker look at the bomb. And for the first time, a major public debate about using it will begin. On August 31st, the latest issue of the New Yorker magazine appears. On its cover, a whimsical portrait of Central Park on a summer day. Inside, a very different portrait of another city on a summer day. The entire issue is one single article, an essay by John Hersey about the experience of the people in Hiroshima, told through the eyes of 6 survivors.
One's a Catholic priest, one's a tailor's widow, A couple of them are doctors, kinds of people that Americans can relate to.
The special issue sells out in hours.
Hiroshima by John Hersey. This astounding report, written for the New Yorker magazine, has deeply affected thousands of Americans.
Radio networks in England, Canada, Australia, and the U.S. preempt regular programming and do live readings by actors.
This chronicle of suffering and destruction is not presented in defense of an enemy. It is broadcast as a warning that what happened to the people of Hiroshima a year ago could next happen anywhere. Chapter 1, A Noiseless Flash.
At exactly 15 minutes past 8 in the morning.
No one had ever seen the consequences of a nuclear bomb. And the knowledge of what this meant doesn't really soak in until afterwards.
Now, in August 46, a year after Hiroshima, one essay is giving the world a whole new perspective on the bomb.
It has enormous consequences. It begins to make people rethink their attitudes towards nuclear weapons.
But nuclear weapons are becoming the key to U.S. security.
Harry Truman and his advisors begin to think atomic weaponry can be the basis of diplomacy.
Former Secretary of War Henry Stimson worries that Americans are turning against nuclear weapons. So he writes a response to the New Yorker piece to justify using the bomb.
It says there were two choices, use the bomb or invade Japan. And it is a false framework. There were alternatives to both the bomb and an invasion.
Would Japan have surrendered without our using the bomb?
There's no way of answering it one way or the other. We cannot relive history.
If Truman had not used the bomb, why didn't he? My son was killed because you didn't use the bomb?
An American airplane.
The debate continues to this day. All that is certain is that life in the atomic age is turning out to be more complicated than it seemed when the bomb first appeared.
Yes, the atom is on its way to brighten our towns and to help manufacture our most dependable and indispensable household servant.
The public flocked to atomic exhibits in search of understanding.
The bomb had a certain kind of mystique, both terrifying and awe-inspiring. And that was the whole other side of the atomic age. X-rays and medicine and atomic power and all these things that are going to contribute to the good life.
The atom has come to town.
Atomic power was given by the mighty hand of God. Atomic power, atomic power.
Do you suppose that our appliances would run as well on atomic energy?
Mighty hand of God.
Today's bonanza is a metal more precious than gold or silver. There's uranium in them dar hills.
It will protect your health, improve your food, bring you less costly living products, and a greater measure of leisure and security.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki paid a big price for their sins. When scourged from the face of earth, their battle could not win.
The peaceful atom, no longer just a laboratory dream, is here today, working wonders.
Will not know the hour. Atomic power.
You know that someday this machine of yours is going to be operating on atomic power?
Well, they can run it on kerosene if they want to, just as long as I'm still at the switch.
With the ever-increasing use of nuclear energy, more towns may eventually become atomic cities.
By the mighty hand of God.
One part of the early atomic age is still going strong today.
Where do we get the word bikini? The designer of the bikini bathing suit designed it 4 days after the test on the Bikini Island because of its explosive, dangerous potential.
It was given by the mighty hand of God.
While the country is adjusting to life in the atomic age, scientists in the original atomic city are looking to update the device that started it all. Every bomb America has is still the original implosion design first tested at Trinity and dropped on Nagasaki. Fat Man, few realize how crude it actually is.
Fat Man was a science fair project. I mean, this was not a production weapon. It was a handmade, craftsman fit all the pieces together. It takes about a week to build one.
2 years after Crossroads, Los Alamos has a new design to try. They'll explode 3 shots on the Pacific island of Eniwetok, a test codenamed Sandstone.
Sandstone had 3 tests, X-ray, yoke, and zebra, and each one tested a new concept in weapons.
This time, the public and press are not invited.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sandstone is the end of an era. In January 1947, the bomb is put under civilian control, administered by the Atomic Energy Commission, AEC. They replace the handmade Fat Man with a new model, the first mass-produced nuclear weapon. And they open a new lab to build the bombs Los Alamos designs. It's the beginning of America's nuclear weapons complex, a massive juggernaut that will drive bomb making and testing for decades, through multiple administrations to the end of the Cold War. The year after Sandstone, another test. But this one isn't at Bikini, Eniwetok, or New Mexico. It's in Kazakhstan.
To the immense surprise of everyone, the Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb, and the balance of power was suddenly and dramatically shifted.
Testing the atomic bomb in the Soviet Union was very important because this is about balancing. If you have this possibility, you're feeling yourself much safer.
Psychologically, we are now on the same level with the United States. Now, the United States cannot dictate to us.
If the power of the atom was God's gift to America, well, now he had given it to our enemy too.
It was a very, very scary moment for the United States. How to respond now to the Soviet Union having a bomb.
We need a quantum leap beyond the Soviets. We have to stay way ahead of them.
Some believe the answer is hydrogen fusion, the same energy that powers the sun. A hydrogen or thermonuclear bomb could be far bigger than an atomic bomb.
There would be no theoretical limit to the size of the bomb you could make.
The leading advocate for the hydrogen bomb is physicist Edward Teller.
Teller is kind of egotistical, and rightly so. He's a really smart guy. But he was kind of hard to get along with.
An idea man. He'd have 10 ideas a day. One idea every month might be good, but he had 10 ideas a day.
He was always taken with the idea of going the next step beyond an atom bomb to a thermonuclear weapon. And I give him a tremendous amount of credit for sticking with this and campaigning for this.
But no one knows how to build a hydrogen bomb. It might even be impossible.
We knew how to make atomic bombs. We could fill warehouses with them. But we didn't know how to make hydrogen bombs. Why would you stop producing a sure thing to work on something you didn't know how to do?
Moreover, some scientists believe this is a chance to save the world by choosing to stop.
This could be a turning point in human history. We can pursue the hydrogen bomb, but we don't have to. We can send a positive message to the international community. We can put pressure on the Soviets not to continue building nuclear weapons. Basically, we can set a good example.
2 months after the Soviet atomic bomb, a committee led by Robert Oppenheimer unanimously recommends against a crash program for a hydrogen bomb. Lewis Strauss and Edward Teller are outraged. But the decision is up to President Harry Truman.
The debate over the hydrogen bomb involved the United States restraining itself without any ability to restrain the Soviets. The Soviets had proven that they could build a bomb. Well, that's a huge risk to take if you're President of the United States.
The Soviets seem determined to expand. They already control Eastern Europe. In 1948, they cut off West Berlin, hoping to take that over as well. To Harry Truman, the answer seems obvious.
Containment. Contain the Soviet Union. Don't allow it to expand. Don't allow it to grow or to gain any more influence. And if we do, you know, it's just going to creep and creep and creep until they'll be in our kitchens.
We need to speed up our work with other countries in strengthening our common defenses. We are united in detesting communist slavery.
At the end of January 1950, Truman announces the U.S. will build a hydrogen bomb.
Truman decides to respond with an even bigger and more destructive weapon. And this is the start of the arms race. This is the start of the escalation that will last for decades.
Just days after Truman approves the H-bomb, physicist Klaus Fuchs, who worked at Los Alamos, is arrested for spying.
It suggested that this was sort of a leaky system, and we had to plug the leaks.
It was a shock, and this was one of the first major events that set in motion the era of McCarthyism and the Red Scare.
Five months later, communist North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union, invades South Korea, which is backed by the U.S.
Spearheaded by tanks, in 2 days they were attacking the capital city itself.
The Cold War wasn't even cold. It was a hot war from pretty much the beginning. There were proxy wars between the U.S. and the Soviet Union that were fought elsewhere.
When the Korean War goes badly, the U.S. begins preparing to use atomic bombs and quickly discovers a problem.
Korea is a very mountainous country, and there was concern that the bombs would not have much effect, that if we used the bombs, it might diminish their threat in the eyes of the Soviet Union, so they were never used in Korea.
As the Korean War drags on, the Soviets are doing atomic tests with bombers. Some atomic scientists have created a symbol to show how close the world stands to nuclear catastrophe, the doomsday clock. At first, they set it at 7 minutes to midnight. Now, with a nuclear arms race accelerating, it's reset to 3 minutes to midnight. 3 minutes to global disaster. With the threat of Soviet bombers carrying nukes, Americans have to adjust to a new reality. We could be hit at home.
In the Cold War, the front line was the front lawn.
You have to take care of yourself. So how do you do that?
Duck and cover. Duck and cover.
You could duck under a desk, you could take shelter in your basement, and survive this.
Our Congress leaves the responsibility for the personal initiative of each of us.
The government does tests to see what would happen to typical Americans.
We begin with the question of shelter, for shelter might save our lives if we were far enough away from ground zero.
They put a family of mannequins dressed in JCPenney clothing inside a suburban ranch home. And they furnished it, they put food in there, canned goods, and they blew them up.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
In fact, the mannequins are blown into various states of dismemberment. But civil defense administrators, the lesson they took from this is that if you took the proper precautions, you could move through this.
But only if you do the right things.
A house that's neglected is the house that may be doomed in the atomic age. A series of civil defense tests were made to discover the effects of atomic heat on American homes. The house on the right, an eyesore. Old, unpainted wood. And look at the paper, leaves, and trash in the yard. All the earmarks of untidy housekeeping. The house in the middle, in good condition, with a clean, unlittered yard. Let's see what happened. On the right is the first to ignite. The trash serves as kindling for the dry, weathered wood. The lack of fire-safe housekeeping has doomed this house to destruction. The house in the middle, cleaned up, painted up, and fixed up, exposed to the same searing atomic heat wave, did not catch fire.
The point was, if you clean up your yard and you don't have debris and things like that, you too can survive a nuclear blast.
It is your choice. The reward may be survival.
And it's your responsibility, not the government. The government can't do it for you. You have to take care of yourself.
And if you don't, if you're hurt, that is your fault.
And just cleaning up may not be enough. You may have to do some remodeling.
Well, folks, I'm glad you could come down to see my fallout shelter. Just finished painting it last night. This room can be put to other uses as well.
Yes, Walt. You could use this as an extra bedroom for company.
It really was the beginning of a kind of militarization where everyone is expected to be prepared.
Thick, heavy walls and ceiling protect against radiation. The thicker, the better.
It's this preparedness culture.
Well, this finishes my fallout shelter.
So what is civil defense about? Really, it's a domestic theater for purposes of diplomacy.
Civil defense supported that idea that nuclear weapons should be the basis of American foreign policy. And in that sense, it was useful.
We'll learn how to save lives so well it won't be worth your while to drop any bombs on us.
If our adversary thinks that the society can survive, it means that our threat to use nuclear weapons is more credible.
Even as the government is trying to convince the public that nuclear war is survivable, in the Pacific, scientists are ready to test the first prototype of what Edward Teller calls the super, a hydrogen bomb. The test is secret, but documented in a now declassified government film.
If everything goes according to plan, we'll soon see the largest explosion ever set off on the face of the Earth.
The device is more science project than weapon, not so much a bomb as a building. The liquid hydrogen fuel must be chilled to 400 degrees below zero, so part of the bomb is a refrigeration plant. The whole thing weighs over 70 tons, all to see if the thermonuclear concept will work.
This is the first full-scale test of a hydrogen device. If the reaction goes, we're in the thermonuclear era.
It is now 30 seconds to zero time. Put on goggles or turn away. Do not remove goggles or face first until 10 seconds after the first light. 3, 2, 1, T0.
It explodes with a force of 10 million tons of TNT, 600 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. Just 9 months later, the Soviets explode their first hydrogen bomb. It's less powerful than America's H-bomb, but it's small enough to be carried by a plane. The Soviet Union has solidified control in Eastern Europe, acquired the atomic bomb, supported a war in Korea, and now has a deliverable hydrogen bomb. The U.S. is in the midst of a Red Scare, a quest to root out anyone who can be blamed for communist success. In this climate of fear and recrimination, Robert Oppenheimer is about to become a target, the victim of Louis Strauss.
He is a horrible, horrible person.
Really one of the evil men in this story.
He's already looking for a way to attack Oppenheimer and humiliate him.
Strauss has never forgiven Oppenheimer for opposing a crash program to develop a hydrogen bomb. When President Eisenhower makes Strauss chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, he sees his chance for revenge.
The first thing he did when he took office was to begin a process that would lead to having Oppenheimer's security clearance lifted.
The AEC has a hearing. Strauss picks the judges and the prosecutor. He gives them secret files on Oppenheimer dating back to the 30s, and he enlists the FBI.
The FBI is tapping Oppenheimer's phone and his attorney's phone and feeding this information to the prosecutor. It is totally a kangaroo court.
They went back over his life step by step, mistake by mistake.
People come to his defense, people attack him.
The women in his life.
All of this communist past.
And Oppenheimer got smaller and smaller and smaller, sitting in this hard chair in the middle of the security hearing.
The moment of truth comes when Edward Teller is asked, "Do you believe Oppenheimer is a security risk?"
And Teller very cleverly never said, "Yes, I do." What he said was, "I would feel more secure if Oppenheimer were no longer asked to advise the government." And with that, he drove in the final nail.
The father of the atomic bomb is stripped of his clearance, kicked out of government forever.
You know, it was witch hunt time. I thought that was disgusting, frankly.
It achieved exactly what his enemies wanted to achieve. It destroyed him. It killed him spiritually.
But Teller pays a price.
The hatred to Edward was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The people who dealt most closely with Edward, I think at Los Alamos at least, disliked him for the rest of his life.
Even as the AEC is going after Oppenheimer, in the Pacific, another test. America's first practical H-bomb. If it works, a deliverable thermonuclear weapon. On March 1st, 1954, it becomes apparent that the bomb does indeed work. Only too well. Because of design errors, it's twice as powerful as predicted. 15 megatons, equal to 15 million tons of TNT.
Approximately 1,000 times as powerful as Little Boy. This is a massive, massive weapon.
The mushroom cloud rises over 15 miles, spreading radioactivity through the atmosphere. Fallout contaminates inhabited islands, and a Japanese fishing boat, ironically named Lucky Dragon. One of the Japanese fishermen dies. Over 200 islanders get sick. The test was secret, but the fallout makes it an international incident.
It brought worldwide attention to the fact of atmospheric testing. Now, should we be testing in the atmosphere when all that happens is this radiation's going to get in the wind currents and expose everybody to radiation?
The incredible power of the H-bomb reveals the futility of civil defense.
The concern before the hydrogen bomb was, could we take shelter? What the hydrogen bomb tests reveal is that that is inadequate. There may be no safety except run.
It was estimated over 4 million would have died in New York City.
If surviving a Soviet H-bomb is impossible, the only option is to deter them from attacking in the first place. To do that, President Eisenhower creates a new policy. Any Soviet aggression will be met with massive nuclear retaliation delivered by the Strategic Air Command, SAC.
The Air Force maintains part of its bomber fleet airborne at all times, prepared to proceed to specific targets.
SAC is led by Curtis LeMay. LeMay realizes that the bomb has forever changed war.
He saw very early that wars would last for days or even hours. And everything had to happen right up front.
LeMay plans a massive first strike on the Soviet Union, what he calls a Sunday punch. Ready to go at a moment's notice, his crews drill constantly.
B-47s and B-52s taking off from bases throughout the free world.
All of a sudden, you've got 90 airplanes that are departing this airport, nuclear weapons on board. You take off, you don't know whether it's really a mission or not. Everything is so classified. You won't get those code instructions until you're airborne. And you know that at 8 or 10 other bases, the same damn thing is happening. That these flow of airplanes are in the air, they will be coming towards the Soviet Union, and unless the Soviet Union backs down sharply, it's not going to be around.
When this red phone is picked up, direct lines to SAC bases on 4 continents are seized.
Massive retaliation means U.S. defense is increasingly dominated by the Air Force.
The Air Force controlled 47% of the national defense budget, at which point the Navy and the Army began thinking, wow, we better get some atomic bombs too.
As the military services compete, America's nuclear stockpile grows and diversifies.
Los Alamos was happy to make it, and the military was happy to pay for it. And so every time they asked for something, the lab responded, sure, no problem.
Nuclear weapons were viewed as just regular weapons, only bigger.
How many different kinds can we fabricate?
Big bombs, big warheads, little warheads.
A nuclear cannon for ground troops. Even a one-man backpack nuke, a way to stop thousands of Soviet tanks from invading Germany.
One nuclear round will be detonated here, 26 minutes prior to the attack.
Blocking avenues of approach by barriers of flooding and cratering and landsliding, attacking autobahns or highways or railroads or bridges. Atomic demolition munitions.
Eventually, the drive to make a nuclear version of anything and everything gets a little out of hand.
There was a nuclear bazooka, which I think probably is a contender for being the most ridiculous.
It detonated perfectly, releasing its lethal radiation.
Some of the physicists said we could actually develop a nuclear hand grenade. The only problem was finding somebody dumb enough to throw it.
So the American stockpile blossoms.
By 1947, we had a stockpile of 13. By 1953, we had over 1,100. By the late 60s, we had over 31,000 nuclear weapons and 36 different types.
I kind of wonder exactly, did you really need all this? But I think a lot of it was the military thought they did. And a lot, I think, is just political. You know, we have more than you,
The ultimate example of "we have more than you" comes in October 1961, when the Soviets detonate the largest bomb in human history. Tsar Bomba. 50 megatons. 50 million tons of TNT.
When the pilot landed, said the plane was highly warped, skin buckled, and the pilot never flew again. He said he had done his job for the motherland and he retired after the drop.
But it's good for nothing except symbolism.
A bomb this big is not really of any utility. You don't kill a lot more people with a gigantic bomb like that than you can with a couple little bombs.
You had two superpowers, and you had to suppress the other superpower from making a first strike. And the only way you could do that was to be so strong that if they did strike you first, they would be wiped out.
Mutual assured destruction. Mad. And looking back, I think it was. On the other hand, by both sides being so strong that they knew they could destroy each other, it kept the peace.
Until it almost didn't. In October 1962, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev sees a chance to make a bold stroke in America's backyard.
Khrushchev decides to put missiles in Cuba in order to change the balance of power.
Even today, new details about Khrushchev's power play are still coming to light.
We still don't know the full story, but it was not just the missiles. The Soviets were planning to create a massive military base in Cuba, the most powerful Soviet military base in the world.
He was thinking of a remapping of the Cold War relationship. Dramatic, unprecedented. But to make it work, Khrushchev had to do it secretly. Because if the United States knew that missiles were going to Cuba, we would stop them.
It almost works. But before the Soviets can complete the installation, a U.S. spy plane discovers the plan. The showdown begins with a speech.
It was about 9 o'clock in the evening that they announced the speech of the President to the nation.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba.
And my father told me, I think they discovered missiles.
A series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
The Soviets were very worried. They were kind of expecting Kennedy to announce not just a blockade, but maybe an invasion of Cuba.
And then it will be strong possibility of the real nuclear war. And it will be end of the world.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
Full retaliatory response on the Soviet Union.
And I knew exactly what a full retaliatory response meant and what the consequences of that would be.
We would consider bombing you with atomic weapons. To see the President of the United States go on national television, tell the world that could happen, that got people's attention.
At United Nations headquarters in New York, the Cuban crisis is the one and only subject of discussion.
The issue which confronts the Security Council is grave.
As Kennedy considers invading Cuba, he calls former President and General Dwight Eisenhower for advice.
General, what's your judgment as to the chances they'll fire these things off if we invade Cuba?
I don't believe it.
You don't think they will? In other words, you would take that risk. Right.
Something may make these people shoot them off. I just don't believe this will.
Yeah, all right.
In any event, of course, I'll say this. I'd want to keep my own people very alert.
Yeah. Well, hang on tight.
Kennedy has no idea that tactical nuclear weapons are already in Cuba.
They were thinking, well, if the Americans land in Cuba, then we wouldn't have to use at least tactical nuclear weapons to repel them, and maybe even mid-range weapons.
Missile officers in Cuba had authorization from the Soviet Union to launch those missiles rather than allow them to be destroyed.
Now imagine if Marines had landed on the beaches of Cuba and had been met by a volley of tactical nuclear weapons.
Very scary days. I truly thought we were going to war. Really, every time I went into that office during the day, I thought it was going to be my last day on Earth.
In the end, Kennedy and Khrushchev both stare into the nuclear abyss and step back.
Two leaders took control of this crisis. They decided, no, we will not start the war, we will try to resolve this diplomatically.
There is a great story of nuclear learning here. When they realized what the consequences could be, Khrushchev really changed his position in a radical way, very quickly.
Khrushchev withdraws the missiles. In return, Kennedy secretly agrees to remove U.S. missiles along the Soviet border.
Cuban Missile Crisis was a much closer call than I think people to this day really realize.
Both sides were behaving really recklessly. But once they saw what the real danger looked like, then both of them made concessions and became very reasonable. And you can even say that the Cuban Missile Crisis began the process of arms control.
As President of the United States, I now sign the instruments of ratification of this treaty.
9 months after the missile crisis, the U.S., Soviets, and Britain agree on the first test ban treaty, which bans nuclear tests in the atmosphere, in space, and underwater. And within a year, the first direct hotline is established between Washington and Moscow. Even before the missile crisis, opposition to the bomb had been building, often spearheaded by women.
Don't give irradiated milk to my children, you know? You have a bomb test, the winds blow radiation to the fields where the cows eat the grass, and then you get the milk and we serve it to our children. No, we're not going to do this anymore.
So many mothers marched against atmospheric nuclear testing that the United States government finally said, all right, we'll put the tests underground.
Underground tests also explore the potential to use the bomb for landscaping on a gigantic scale, possibly excavating road cuts, harbors, canals. The testing that began in 1945 and continued through 1962 included over 200 nuclear explosions. Once it moved underground, there were 800 more, before all U.S. testing stopped in 1992. But moving testing underground was only the first step. Books and films began to explore what nuclear war and its aftermath would mean. Grim dramas like On the Beach, Failsafe, the dark satire of Dr. Strangelove, No Nukes, a groundbreaking concert, film, and rally. The Day After, a television movie that draws 100 million viewers and becomes a major cultural event. And War Games, which cautions that in nuclear war, the only winning move is not to play. Slowly but surely, the public is leading the leaders. What began in 1963 with the first test ban treaty leads to other agreements, attempts to slow down the buildup of nuclear weapons. By 1986, Ronald Reagan is president, George Shultz is Secretary of State. In October, Reagan meets Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev in Reykjavik, Iceland, and something remarkable happens.
President Reagan's on one end of the table, and I'm sitting next to him. Gorbachev's on the other end of the table, and Shevardnadze's sitting next to him. And we talked about eliminating nuclear weapons.
He and Gorbachev, in a totally unscripted, totally improvisational way, moved closer to a superpower agreement to denuclearize the world than ever happened before or has happened since.
Such a dramatic moment where two presidents of these superpower enemies suddenly find this common platform, common wish.
But the common wish to get rid of the bomb ultimately proves impossible. The sticking point is a new U.S. technology called Star Wars, promoted by Edward Teller.
It was a technology the Soviets did not have, and it was a technology that they felt could be used to make it impossible for the Soviets to have a nuclear deterrent.
And Gorbachev was not able to accept that.
The Cold War is thawing. 3 years after Reykjavik, the Berlin Wall comes down. In 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev dissolves the Soviet Union, all without the bomb being used.
We got out of it with the skin of our teeth. We had a couple of close calls along the way. And I think, we were lucky.
These two countries were able to end the most dangerous, the most protracted confrontation in history.
At the height of the nuclear arms race, the U.S. and Soviet Union together had over 60,000 nuclear weapons.
It's absolutely insane. And when we get enough distance from this, people will look back on it as a moment of humanity's most extraordinary insanity.
It was an overkill by 5,000% on both sides. It was stupid, it was wasteful, it would have been the ultimate catastrophe, and yet it worked.
The bomb is what keeps this whole cycle a Cold War, not a hot war. Without the bomb, at some point, we would have been fighting each other.
The legacy of the bomb was that it really changed the nature of global politics. It was just a whole new ball game.
The bomb brings the understanding to the politicians that now you cannot win the war, because if you will start the war, you will lose more than you will gain.
Today, besides the U.S. and Russia, 6 other nations also have the bomb, plus South Africa, which had it and got rid of it, and Israel, which will not confirm or deny having it.
We don't have control over them or what they might do with it. The scariest one is India and Pakistan.
Some experts believe even a limited nuclear war between India and Pakistan would be catastrophic for all of us.
There would be so much smoke and smog from the cities burning that there would be a sort of nuclear winter around the whole world, dropping average temperatures just enough to cause crop failures worldwide. And about 2 billion human beings would starve to death.
People do not understand the danger. They don't understand the likelihood it's going to happen is really high, and they don't understand the magnitude.
Over 70 years ago, a few scribbles on a blackboard opened the door to a new reality. Fateful decisions set the world on a path to nuclear weapons.
I don't feel any guilt or blame about it. I think my view really is if we hadn't done it, somebody else would have. And it would be with us in any case.
There is no going back. The knowledge of how to destroy ourselves is here to stay. It appears that our task is learning how to live with it.
I think what should give us hope is that in all the decades since 1945, not one nuclear weapon has been exploded in anger anywhere in the world. We've managed somehow to keep our thumb off the button, and let's hope we continue.